following podcast is meant for a mature adult audience. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to On a Quest. I'm Jill Urchek, a podcast about everything supernatural, unexplained, paranormal, UFOs, spirits, ghosts, angels, God, all of it. Everything that cannot necessarily be proven, but you know it's true. That's what this podcast is about. And there are many, many things that this encompasses. One of them that I've been interested in, and I had a job, I had a lot of downtime on this job in between reports that I was doing on the radio, and I started looking up NDE for near-death experiences. I got on this site, and I was just completely captivated by all of these things I was reading, and I wanted to know more. It's been something I've been extremely interested in. I'm lucky enough to come across somebody who, well, she wasn't lucky for dying, but she was lucky for living. And I can tell you this, she wrote a book called 37 Seconds. That is how long she was clinically flatlined for. And she has got a story to tell. Fortunately, she's here to tell it. Her name is Stephanie Arnold. And Stephanie, how are you?
I'm great.
I'm so glad that I got to talk to you, and even happier that I had somebody at work that came across you, because that is really strange how things work out. When I was just telling this lady, I'm interested in this kind of stuff, she said, I've got somebody for you. So now that I told the audience, pretty much I wanted to keep it on my end as brief as possible because I wasn't there. But the fact that you died and came back, I think is good enough to let people listen. So before you even tell me what had happened to you, the key to this is you had premonitions this was going to happen, which is even odder than dying and coming back. And this was while you were pregnant with your second child, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. When did these premonitions during your pregnancy start?
When I was 20 weeks pregnant, I had had a baby before. I had been through a pregnancy before, so this wasn't an unusual thing to be pregnant. Mm-hmm. The first 20 weeks of the pregnancy, no issue, no morning sickness. It was fantastic. It was our first boy. And at the 20-week ultrasound, they had noticed that I had a, which is basically what the plant is growing on top of the cervix. It's not too uncommon. It's 1 to 100 pregnancies. So it wasn't anything for anybody to worry about.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, as soon as I was in that doctor's office and they said that, I had a really strong vision that this was not going to good. And my husband, who's a PhD in economics from University of Chicago, as linear a scientific analytical brain can one have.
Right.
He says, what are you talking about? So I said, I don't know. I have a very rare blood type. I have O blood, which is like 11% of this population. He said, I have a blood type. I don't know what this placenta previa thing is, but I've got a really bad feeling. And then from that moment on, I would be walking my daughter in a stroller across the park. We were living in New York at the time. And I would see a fountain, and it was a cold February day, and I'd be, reminded of how beautiful the fountain is in the summer. And then all of a sudden I would think about the water and it would turn into blood, and I would feel my body. I would actually see that vision, and I would feel blood hemorrhaging in my body, and raced to the emergency room thinking I was already hemorrhaging. And when I get to the hospital, there was nothing wrong.
So you were experiencing the feelings already as if it was happening when it wasn't. When you say you saw blood, was it in your mind's eye, or did you actually think the water was blood?
So I saw the fountain. I saw the water moment in my head, like how beautiful flowing. And then all of a sudden the water turned to blood, and I felt my body get very light and fainted, and had to hold myself up with the stroller. So it was a visceral reaction to a vision that I had had, and it was unexplainable. And it would happen day in and day out. It wasn't like that was just one vision. I would be walking in a grocery store and the things to make that night for dinner. All of a sudden, I would have a vision of my casket and me being buried. And I would see me dead on the operating table with my stomach from my sternum to my pelvis cut wide open. I would have, I'd be walking and then thinking like these organs are going to combine like a lava lamp. And I had no explanation for it. And every time I had these visions, I would feel them already happening in my body. And I'd go to the hospital and I'd tell a doctor and I'd go visit a friend. And if you, who didn't know me, saw me pregnant waddling down the street, you would say, "Oh, how's your pregnancy going?" And I would say, I'm going to, like it was like that. I mean, I ended up having to just say it as casually as that, because I was like, maybe somebody would understand what I'm saying, and this overwhelming sense of foreboding I was having would have some sort of explanation. Because the people that I was talking to, the scientists that had all the big letters behind their names and had their data, and in their defense, all my tests were negative. They went with what they usually went with, and that was, "Stephanie, maybe you're hormonal. Maybe you're a little crazy on this one. Maybe, whatever it is." And no one believed me.
Well, reading the book, I mean, I felt so bad for you. It was just like you would have, talked to Grover from Sesame Street if he was listening, just to have him say that he understood you. And I get it.
Absolutely.
I think what makes this strong premonition, what was a premonition, much more than intuition, which I have a lot of intuition, but never where I was physically feeling something like physical happening to my body. That had to scare the hell out of you, girl.
Yeah, look, I always explain it to people as my worst experience was the 3 months before I gave birth.
Ugh.
After what happened, I was like, all right, well, nobody was listening to me. And then I come out the other side of it. So I was like, and then all of their nightmares started. So for me, those 3 months, not being confident I was not going to come out of this, that I had 3 months, imagine being buried alive and you're watching the last few minutes of your breath. I was watching the last few moments, the last few days, the last few weeks of time that I would spend with my family. And I didn't want to go. So I was doing everything in my possible, like anything I could do to talk to anybody. Somebody, please listen. I don't want to die.
And you were, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Because, I'm going back to things you were, up until you actually were ready to have that baby, you even said to yourself, whether it was mentally or not, this is it, I'm dying. This wasn't like I'm going to die. It was like, there's nothing I could do about it now. Here it is.
Right.
Because, okay, so all the doctors that you were saying this to all told you the same thing you said, and like you're right, in their defense, your pregnancy's fine, we really can't do anything right now about it. I understand that, you understand that, but to have a premonition that strong, how did you feel when you looked at your child that you already had? I mean, you had to be like, I'm never going to. Oh my gosh. Look, I only have one kid and I know what he means to me, and the thought of anything ever happening is devastating to not feel like I could ever see him again. Right.
Imagine you're looking at your son and you're pregnant with this child that you can't bond with because all you're thinking is that this pregnancy is going to kill you.
Right.
And this child of yours is in front of you, and you have so many life lessons you want to teach him, and you have so many memories you want to create, and you love your husband so much that you want to watch those memories happen together, and you have so many things, like your life is just starting out. And here it is that you are on a runaway freight train that you are the only one that can see this brick wall in front of you. That's it. Nobody else can see.
Yeah. And your husband, go ahead.
No. It was the most petrifying time in my life. I was absolutely confident I was not going to make it through. I had made arrangements, and, I gave birth over at Northwestern and over at Prentice, and we have friends of ours that were, fellows in gynecological oncology. And they said, "Stephanie, what you're afraid of happening is less than a half of a percent chance of happening." And I said, well, if I'm going to need a hysterectomy, and if I'm going to hemorrhage, and if I'm going to do this, will my OB-GYN do this? And he's like, to be honest with you, if you will need it, which you will not, but if you will, then you want a guy to do it, because they're seasoned with more expert in high risk reproductive organ cancers and surgeries, that those are the ones you want to perform the procedures. So I actually made an appointment with the head of gyn-onc over at Northwestern. And as a 7-month healthy pregnant woman walking into that doctor's office, it was very difficult to get the appointment at first. Right, and then when I'm sitting, they're like, what kind of cancer do you have? And I'm like, I don't. They're like, why do you want to see the doctor? I'm like, because I'm going to need a hysterectomy. Well, who told you that? I just know. Can you just make the appointment?
Right.
And my husband, who's sitting in the waiting room, and you see these beautiful women suffering from cancer with IVs in their arms, no hair on their heads. And he's like, we are taking up this man's time. It's life and death for these women. And you are talking about something that's in your head. And I said, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe this man has heard about something like what I'm saying, or maybe he would have had this idea about this foreboding, and maybe there's something about it. And when we concluded, and he actually gave me a homework assignment to do an MRI to see if the organs actually did combine in order to be there during my mandatory C-section, that he would be there. The MRI was negative. And so my husband's like, you should feel better. And I said, no, I actually feel worse, because if there was something wrong, then that would give me a reason why I was acting so erratic, why I was demanding this happen. And then I would have had to, focus on in order to get to the other side. But at this point, I was running out of people to tell my crazy foreboding story to. And I was confident that nobody was listening.
And your husband, being your best friend, is the one person, and it, in the book, he was in no way, from what you wrote, judging you or anything, but he wasn't believing you. Not that he thought you were lying, but he just wasn't getting it. Because it sounds, I could imagine my husband would be like, you're fine. I don't understand. You're fine.
Right.
To tell somebody you're not has to be the craziest thing in the world. And to live with that has to be the hardest thing in the world, which it's hard enough being pregnant and dealing with a lot of feelings. But he stood by you. He supported you going to these doctors.
He did.
And God bless him for it. Because honestly, I think at that point, my husband would be in divorce court. He supported you, going to these doctors. And that's good. Even though he wasn't really in it, the fact that he was there for you. Yeah.
One of the things he said, and that I write about in the book, is that he said he thought maybe there was something wrong with the baby, and that maybe that was the reason I was acting so crazy, but he didn't want to actually articulate that. And so if he did articulate that, then maybe that would be self-fulfilling, right? Or maybe that you're putting energy towards it. So he kept that to himself, and he didn't talk about that. And he went to the doctor's appointments, maybe thinking they would come up with a conclusion as to, maybe there's something wrong with the baby and that's why she's acting so erratically.
And, okay, he's trying to find something in there to believe you. You know? Again, you've got yourself a good man there, Stephanie.
I do. But, I do. There's no question.
Just, the whole story is just, you've had not premonitions, intuitions before, I'm assuming. We're women, we have these things. But this one was so different because you were feeling it physically. How would you describe what made this real?
So I say everybody, has some level of intuitive abilities, right? Just because it doesn't fit in with the 5 senses doesn't mean the 6th sense doesn't exist. And I believe that everybody has intuition. As a kid, I had seen things happen, and I felt in other people that I'm like, this person's going to die, a perfectly healthy person in front of me, and 2 days later they're dead. And at 10 years old, 12 years old, when those things happen, you get a little freaked out or a lot freaked out. And then you say, you know what, I'm not going to say these things anymore in my head or out loud, because what if I am willing this to happen? And I had nobody to talk to about it. So at some point I just shut it down. And also half of the time I was wrong as a kid. So you don't know what you're feeling, what you are. And you're not in tune as you get older. And once you have children, don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but your maternal instinct and your mother's instinct comes in much sharper after you have that child or when you're pregnant. You're much more aware of your body when something is wrong or when something doesn't feel right or is off, or maybe it's about to be wrong with your child.
Yeah.
This was a little different. This was a lot different.
A lot different.
This was, yeah. So let me correct myself. This was a lot. This was me having a knowing. It was me seeing the future 3 months ahead of time. And it wasn't just a feeling of foreboding. Sometimes doctors will tell, oh, you're having a feeling of foreboding. Sometimes that could mean it's a heart about to happen. And it's well documented that people that have had cardiac could have a feeling of foreboding, right?
Right.
This was a detailed vision of exactly what this domino effect was going to happen to my body. And it happened exactly the way I said it was going to happen. And there's no scientific explanation for how it is that I've seen everything in that great detail.
Okay.
So no, it was the first time that happened.
So, okay. So I want you to tell, the audience what happened. But before you do, tell them about your little angel that pretty much believed you and was able to set this in motion to have the backup that you needed. That
Absolutely.
was able to say there was something
Sure.
about you she believed.
So I had gone, I can't even tell you how many. I mean, you read about it in the book. I've now kind of compartmentalized it because it was so traumatic. But I had spoken to so many doctors and nurses and friends and people. And at some point after the MRI came back negative, my OB-GYN, who is brilliantly compassionate and loving and caring, she said, I can't calm you down. Why don't you have a consultation with anesthesia? I said I didn't have a consultation with anesthesia for my first child. And they're like, yeah, you know what? At least maybe they'll go through what the epidural is, where you recover, just talk to them. So I had a phone call with a fellow doctor by the name of Dr. Grace Lim. And she answered the phone and she explained to me what would happen with the epidural, what would happen with the anesthesia, where I would recover. And I said, okay, I know all of this. What happens if XYZ happens? Tell me what happens then. And I went through everything that I had done up until that point. And she said later, I had never had a patient who spoke so clearly about what was going to happen to her, had actually seen specialists to save her life, and had a baby before and had a C-section before. Right. So it wasn't this fear of unknown. So in that one phone call, unbeknownst to me, she flagged my file and incorporated extra blood in a crash cart in the operating room. And that's 100% what saved my life.
That is, and again, the reason I'm doing this podcast is I believe everything is mapped out and laid out and everything happens for a reason. You meet people for a reason, or you turn right or left for a reason. So the fact that your gynecologist sent you to this woman, told you to call this woman to calm you down, I believe anyway, was part of the plan to save you. And obviously you do too. I know a lot of people, when I say things like that, I don't believe in coincidences. They're like, I drive people crazy, but I don't know.
Why don't you say the exact same thing to my husband, because it drives him crazy. He's like, honey, that is statistically impossible.
I don't.
And I said, you know what? I don't believe in coincidences.
No,
he's like, I can't. He's like, honey, you can't say that. So you're saying this. And I said, I'm telling you, I do not believe in them. And he's like, so basically you're telling me that you were always going to live. I said, obviously I was always going to live. I did not know that. But I said, with all the things that were in motion, my life was saved because of all of that perfect storm coming together. But it wouldn't have come together had I not spoken up. I could have been passive.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, I'm sure, and I'm not saying this happened, but I am sure a lot of people, you poor thing, looked at you like, oh boy, crazy pregnant woman. Sure, they were a lot nicer about it, which is awful.
After the fact. Yeah. Let me tell you, it took everything I had after it happened to not say, I told you so.
You're a better woman than I am. I would have said, listen, you jerk off.
No, I was sitting back and I have friends of mine now that said, after the second and third and fourth doctor told you that this was unrealistic and your tests were negative, I would have shut up. I would have moved on. I said, and then you would have been dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you would have been 6 feet under and I'd be putting flowers on your gravesite.
Absolutely. I said, what's the worst thing that could happen? They think you're crazy. They already thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
So now, okay, so if I was wrong, I'd send them flowers and candy and I wouldn't get pregnant again and tell me not to have a child with them again. Okay, fine. Sorry. I was a little freaked out. What do you want me to tell you? But in the off chance that you are right, in that 1% chance that you are right, it's not worth staying quiet if it can save your life.
No, and let people think you were nuts if you were and nothing went wrong. Who cares? Who cares? So, okay, so you go in, you have your baby. What happens? What medically went wrong?
Yes. So my husband was not with me at the time. So he was in New York and I was in Chicago. And I ended up bleeding on the kitchen floor. And I took my child and we went straight to Prentice. And I am getting prepared for surgery, and Jonathan thought he could make it. But they were like, everything's quiet in the operating room. Let's just go in. I kissed my daughter a million times. I smiled because what?
I'm just feeling your pain.
Yeah,
I could cry.
Yeah, no, I kissed my daughter a million times. The last thing I wanted her to see was me crying and in panic, because if this is the last time you're going to see me, I want, if a 2-year-old can remember what your mother is going to look like, I'm like, I want her to remember a smile.
Right.
So once they wheeled me out, I broke down crying, and my doctor is a friend. And I said, Julie, there's something wrong. You need to put me under general anesthesia. And she says, Stephanie, I think you're just nervous. Jonathan's not here. And, you have an epidural. You are, glued to that table. Mm-hmm. You are strapped in. Yeah. And I was about to go into the delivery room that was going to give life to my son and take mine. So you can imagine getting wheeled in, all the bright lights, everybody is there ready to operate. Everybody is calm. It's a pretty standard thing.
Right.
And I am crawling out of my skin. Ugh. And so at some point, I thought to myself, if I was having elective surgery, none of these doctors would be doing this procedure. Because if I was connected like that, they'd be like, you know what, something feels off. We're going to another day.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it was coming out no matter what. So this was going to happen. And they deliver the baby. Jacob is perfectly healthy, happy, no problem, exactly the way I saw him. They delivered the placenta, and 3 seconds later, I was dead.
3 seconds?
Yeah.
Oh, that magical number 3. Okay. Ugh.
Yes. So what I ended up having is a very rare amniotic fluid embolism. It's a 1 in 40,000 risk where amniotic cells get into the mother's bloodstream. And if you happen to be allergic to it, your body goes into somewhat of an anaphylactic shock. Mm-hmm. And in most cases, women don't make it. Oh. So much so that, so your body goes into cardiac arrest, your lungs shut down, my kidneys went offline. And if you're one of 40% that make it through phase 1, phase 2 starts, which is an anesthesiologist's worst nightmare. It's called DIC, which is your body's inability to clot blood.
Right.
But some have it as an acronym for death is coming.
Ew.
Yeah.
See, now that's not a coincidence. That is creepy.
Yeah. Oh. So now, remember, I have O negative blood, right. Less than 7% of this population. So that extra blood, my platelets went from an extraordinarily high number, let's say 236,000, down to 12,000 in minutes. And when they normally have a C-section, they either have like 6 or 10 units of blood prepared, right? That's about it. But because the extra blood was prepared, they were able to keep me above ground without any neurological deficit because they had extra blood there to keep it going. And my body was given 60 units of blood and blood products.
60?
So 60. Your blood supply is 20 units of blood. And my body was given 60 units, 3 times my blood supply in order to keep me online.
Okay.
After that happened, I think Jonathan had arrived at the hospital, and they were packing me, prepping me, and getting me ready to put me into the ICU, into a medically induced coma. The Northwestern has had, at least I was told at the time, that in their 30-year history, they've had 10 AFEs.
Okay.
6 of them did not make it. 3 of them have severe neurological damage, where one's in a vegetative state, a permanent vegetative state, and the other ones are not functioning.
Awful.
I'm the first to have survived like this. So I get transferred to ICU. My husband is probably an anesthesiologist, perfect family member, because my husband was an Air Force pilot. So when you are an Air Force pilot, and anesthesiologists for some reason are pilots too, some of them are pilots, but they can relate to pilot speak. They go into crisis mode, but crisis mode is very calm. And my husband goes into, what's the morbidity, mortality? Where do we need to go? How many phases is this? And then my wonderfully beautiful, hopeful agnostic of a husband says,
I hope you're listening, hubby.
says, if she needs a hysterectomy, this is the doctor we met with 2 months before. And they said, look, we don't know if she'll need a hysterectomy right now. She's stable and she won't survive another surgery. So we have her in ICU, but we think we've stopped the bleed. They transfer me to ICU. He's there listening to the machines. If you go onto my website, to stephaniearnold.net, you'll see like there's videos and there's pictures, but you can Google it anywhere. But there's a picture of me in the coma, and the machines it looks nothing like me.
I saw that
at all. But it's just my own mother felt she walked into the wrong room.
Right.
But I had started dialysis. Like there was massive trauma everywhere, and they didn't know if there was neurological damage. So he was sitting there listening to the machines, breathing for me. And 7 hours later, they realized that I was still hemorrhaging, and they called in the doctor I'd met with, the gynonc, 2 months before, to come in and perform the hysterectomy.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and the pathology of the uterus showed the merging of those two organs together, but it was a microscopic merge, so they couldn't pick it up on the MRI. And so everything had happened exactly the way I said it was going to happen. I just didn't have a name for it.
And so you didn't even know what the official name was?
No.
You just knew something bad was happening?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Well, I saw the domino effect. I saw the hemorrhage. I saw the organs combining. I saw them needing to put me under general anesthesia. I saw the baby being fine. I saw them cutting me from the top to bottom. I saw all of that, but I didn't know what was going to trigger all of it.
Right.
I just knew that it was happen.
Okay. So as if that isn't horrible enough.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's all. No, a bee sting. No.
Yeah, it was a day in the park. Right.
Yikes, not a day at the park. I had a C-section. I can't even imagine. Like, I was like, cut me open, get the baby out, and send me home.
Right.
And even that is just frightening. But
it is.
It was months after all this, right, that you started actually remembering how long was it after? I think you said it was months where you started remembering, wait a minute, how could I remember things going on in the hallway or that doctor?
What actually happened was, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Nope.
I just want what actually happened was I was on, the story came out in local Chicago. I had a news reporter, Dana Kosloff, that, Dana.
Right.
Over at CBS. And she told the story one night, and the very next morning we were the cover story of Yahoo. And then after that was Good Morning America, and then we were on the doctors. And at one point, I didn't have time. I was on dialysis. I was recovering, trying to physically walk again, and all of these things. And by the way, there was a baby that needed me. Oh, and by the way, there was a 2-year-old needed to take care of. And by the way, I had a husband that I wanted to hold his hand, but I couldn't walk. And so I need to get better focus on that. And then when the story kind of went viral and a little crazy, Steve Harvey asked me on his show, did you see the light? And I said, man, I'm like, I don't know. They gave me a lot of drugs. I'm like, I was traumatized. I don't remember. After talking to my anesthesiologist, she's like, we give you drugs so you don't remember. And I was like, I can understand that. I said, but I was asking some people, I'm like, what did you have for dinner on that Tuesday night? What did you have? Where did you go? Like, what did you do? All these things. And so I'm like, if there was a way to remember, I was okay to say, if there's nothing there, there's nothing there.
Right. You weren't going to make it up just so you could, so you could sound cool.
At all.
Okay.
No, it wasn't about that. So for me, I sat there and I was like, all right, if there's a way to find out. I had gone to plenty of psychiatrists, psychologists dealing with post-trauma, but every time I'd ask them, how is it I saw everything months before it happened? They were like, yeah, let's not worry about that right now. Let's worry about getting you out of the trauma. I'm like, you see, I have a problem with that because in case I have another premonition, I am going to freeze. I'm going to be fearful. I don't know how I'm going to act. I'm going to be re-traumatized again.
Right.
So this doesn't work for me. So I ended up finding a regression therapist. And regression therapy uses hypnotherapy to take you back into moments of trauma to kind of you reposition like the trauma to make it not as traumatic. And I went in to remember the 6 days, like the flatline in the 6 days, what happened. And I got a lot more than I thought I was going to get out of it. So I videotaped my hypnotherapy. I am a little type A if you couldn't figure that out. And
well, you're in the business I am. You have to be type A.
Yeah. As a TV producer, I was like, you know what? I do my research. Like, what if I'm with a quack that's going to make me walk naked in the middle of Wrigley Field?
And quack like a duck. Right.
Absolutely. So I videotaped therapy. My husband, first time, was like, why can't we avoided the crisis. Let's move on. Why do you need to remember this? And I'm like, this is how I deal with it. I'd rather go through the fire and out the other side of it and purge it because I don't know how it's going to manifest later if I don't get rid of it. So I do the therapy, and you actually see me on the hypnotherapy going through a seizure and convulsing and actually saying what is going on in the operating room after I flatlined, where the doctors were standing, that the first crash cart didn't work, but the second crash cart did, what my doctors were saying, what they were doing, what happened with my daughter down the hall, like all of these things. So the video is pretty intense, and you can actually see a very small clip of it on the spiritual section of the website.
Okay.
And I showed it to my husband, who can't watch it for more than 30 seconds without slamming down the computer. And he says, how do you know you didn't see this on an episode of Grey's Anatomy?
Oh my gosh. I love your husband. He's so analytical.
He said, look, it's a fair point after I called him a bunch of names I won't say right now. But so I said, it's a fair point. So I said, lucky for us, it's on tape. So let me give the tapes to the doctors that were there and present during this time. So I handed the tapes to my doctors. And by the way, my therapist said to me, I said, how can you prove that what I'm seeing is real? Like, how do you prove for patients? She says, well, sometimes it doesn't even matter whether it's the truth or not. It's that the patient feels better. I said, yeah, but I need to know if this is true because else I'm making this up in my head. So I sent this to the doctors, and both my anesthesiologist and my OB-GYN are like, I didn't learn this in middle school. And it's accurate down to exactly where we were standing. And there's no way you known that because your eyes were taped shut when you were intubated. And by the way, okay, maybe the hearing is the last to go, but you most certainly couldn't have seen. And you were having action, so there was a curtain in front of your face. So you couldn't have seen where we were standing, what we were doing, and everything. And one of the things I said was, I asked my doctor, I said, did you keep saying this can't be happening? This can't be happening? She said, I did, but in my head.
Oh, that's creepy. That made my hair stand up, but in a cool way. Yes. In her head, you heard her head. Yeah. That sounds funny. So, okay.
Yeah. So then in those moments, what I freaked out about and how I book is that that in the moment of flatlines, I was clinically after 30 seconds. Now, when I was pitching the book and manuscript, one very big publisher wrote it to me.
Okay, wait, Stephanie, hold on. You're cutting out. Yeah. So
okay.
I can edit that or I can leave it in because this is the kind of show it is. Okay. Start talking again and repeat that last sentence. I apologize.
So one of the things when I was writing the manuscript, so I was clinically 37 seconds. When I wrote the manuscript, one publisher actually said she didn't die long enough to make it compelling.
That's so rude.
Yeah, it's so fantastic that I can't even make this crap up.
No.
And she put it in writing, and it was just so obnoxious that I was like, and what I've learned is that 37 seconds on this plane, on this time, is most certainly not time and space. Dimension. And
I've heard about that.
It's a download. I had a download of like a worth of information. So what I saw in those moments, and I don't go into huge amounts of details in the book because I talk about this more, is it was very traumatic writing the book. I do talk about moments that I saw, but like, my uncle who had been passed for 20 years at the time was there to greet me. But it wasn't him. It was hundreds of spirits, people I didn't know. So I could say, all right, well, in a moment of panic, you're going to wish to wish that they're there to support you. These things were happening to me throughout the 3 months. I just didn't know it until I went back and saw it. So I had seen my husband's father passed before I even met him. And I don't even know what he looks like in color. It's a picture, black and white picture in our house of him. And I said, and I explained, your father was wearing mustard colored jacket, and he had leather patches on his elbows, and he had this ascot on, and and I was going through this. It was a tweed, and it had green stripes in it, and I'm going through my husband's, he never wore a tweed. And I said, okay, fine, but he was having this coin, and it's this foreign coin, and I go into great detail about this coin, and I said, it's not from the U.S., and it's odd shaped, and it's misshapen, and it's not a metal that I know, but it's like, and he kept rolling the coin in his hands, and I said, I don't know what this is, and he said, Stephanie, I don't know what you're talking about, but say hi to my father next time you see him, right? So I said, so I'm like, fine. So I go family member to family member asking about the tweed jacket, and his father's sister-in-law says, I don't know what Jonathan's talking about. Are you talking about a tweed jacket that has a green lining on the inside and everything? I said, yes, and it's got mustard colored pattern, which she's like, Stephanie, that was his favorite jacket. And I said, and then I go back to my husband, I'm like, what are you talking about? That's his favorite jacket. And he says, well, if you would have said herringbone, I would have said,
oh my God.
So I said, you're an a-hole, first of all. I said, second of all, I had to look up herringbone because I'm like, what does that mean? And so he says, I said, herringbone is a stitch in a tweed jacket. And then I'm like, okay, so what about the coin? And so I'm asking family member after family member, and I write the whole thing in the book. And I said, I finally get to his brother, and he's got 2 brothers and a sister, and the brother was the last one to talk about it.
Okay.
And I said, and he's like, oh, how's your therapy going? And I said, well, about this coin. And he says, it's funny you should mention that. And I said, why? And my husband is sitting right next to me. He says, well, the other day I was opening up one of Dad's old suitcases, and behind the zipper, in the crevice of the suitcase, there was a coin. I said, do me a favor, can you describe that coin to me? And almost verbatim was the coin that I was telling him about. And I look at my husband. I was polite. And I said, I'm going to bed.
I'm going to bed alone.
So those kind of things, started to happen, and then they continue to happen.
Okay. Because as I was reading it, because I've read a lot of accounts, like I had mentioned earlier, some things were the same in all these accounts about people they see. And the biggest theme you said about time, that there's no time in eternity. So what could seem like 50 years on Earth is a blink in eternity. Did you saw relatives? Did you say you saw angels?
I don't know how to answer that, because the way that I saw hundreds of people, they looked like you and me, except there was a glow.
Yeah, like they had a facial.
Right, exactly. Like it looked like facial, like it was, but and it below the ankles, because I don't want the confirmation that obviously I know what I'm seeing, but I don't really know that I know what I'm seeing. So I never below the ankles. And I'm just like, okay, this person looks real. This person's giving me moments that are real. Can't really see through them. I see this like this aura, what have you, but I don't know the difference yet. And maybe that's because I'm a newbie here. That if that's an angel or if that's a spirit or if it's a ghost or if it's a guardian angel or if it's a spirit guide or what that looks like. All I know is I saw people that I knew and people that I didn't know. And it was almost like a congregation welcoming me. Like I was a step below them coming up and they were like, oh, who's this? Interested in seeing. Some of them had messages.
And you said too, and I'm comparing this with the accounts I've read, that the temperature was perfect, right? No wind. Did you like 70 degrees, just a perfect temperature?
Yeah, and it felt like a sandy beach, but a solid, sandy, warm beach. I didn't have shoes on, and I remember just feeling and just a calmness. Happy to see everybody, but then like, get me the heck out of here because this is not where I want to be.
Because you knew you wanted to be with your baby and your babies and your husband.
Yeah.
Did you look for God? That's just, did you think, hey, where's God?
Yeah, no, I didn't.
Okay.
I think that from my perspective, I was like, okay, I kind of know where I am. Get me the heck out of here. It's nice to see you all. Love you, Grandpa. Love you, Grandma. Love you, aunts and uncles. It's great seeing you. I got to go back.
Yeah,
and
peace
so
out.
there
Right.
wasn't, in my, and I don't know why some people fight go back, why some people feel like it's the most beautiful place in the world and I want to stay there. I don't know those reasons. Everybody has their own reasoning. But for me, I have the man that I love and these two beautiful children and a stepdaughter. And I'm like, I'm not done. I'm like, I am not done. I'm not staying here and I'm going to fight.
So do you feel, because I've also read that you have a choice and that I've read some people say, whether it's God or relatives or spirit guides say, it's not your time, go back. Some people fight, like you said, no, I want to stay here. Do you feel you had a choice to come back? Do you feel like you could have stayed if you wanted to?
I don't really know how to answer that question because I'm being perfectly honest, me telling you that I had a choice and that I fought would be disrespectful to the people that stayed dead. And then their loved ones would sit there and say, so my loved one didn't fight hard enough. Right. And I could never put myself in that position to say, oh yeah, I fought hard and that's why I'm here. I'm not done yet. I feel like there's a lot of work to be done and I'm not done yet. I don't know why other people will pass or stay past or come back or what have you. But I don't think I think I only had one choice and the choice was to come back.
Just as a quick side note, I didn't have, anything remotely what you had, but I was in a car accident. I was actually in two. One, I was walking and I got hit and I survived that one. I should have died. But the second one was a rollover on I-55, the Stevenson Expressway. And my friend was driving. It was a blizzard. Long story short, she's going south on the Stevenson. The van or the car, whatever she had, turned northbound in the southbound lanes. And as it was turning, everything was in slow motion. Okay. Everything stopped. I mean, when people say your life stopped, this is the only way I could describe it. And I remember when my eyes were closed, what felt like an hour of rolling over probably only lasted 3 seconds. But in that moment, Stephanie, I remember saying to myself, that's why I'm listening to you saying, I'm not done, I'm coming back. Me, the big wimp over here, here's what I said to myself. Holy crap. I'm going to die on the Stevenson Expressway. My shit, excuse my language. I'm not editing that out. This is not commercial radio, people. And I said to myself, I'm going to die on the freaking Stevenson and nobody's going to ever see me again or know what I'm feeling at this moment. And then my last thoughts were, and this creeps me out that I even said this. My last thought was, please God, take me, take care of me. And please don't let me feel any pain. And then I woke up in a batch of snow. And I said to my girlfriend, are these clouds? Where am I? Because I was a little disillusioned. She's like, no, it's snow. But I just remember I didn't like fight it. I just remember saying, just please God, take care of me. Because in that moment of rolling over, I mean, what could I do about it?
No, there's nothing you can do.
So hearing you say, and yours is completely, entirely different. Yours is its own beautiful
but
miracle.
It's all relative.
It is relative.
Like in that moment, you are almost certain you're not going to make it. And in that moment, you look up and you say, it's out of my hands. It's in my hands. And that the exact thing that happened when I was about to die. It was like, I am no longer in control.
Right.
You are in control.
I just remember that feeling, but it was a very oddly peaceful feeling I had when I surrendered it. But anyway, getting back to you, because it's not about me.
No, but I would think you would be more worried that somebody was going to report on the traffic about your accident and be like, God.
It's kind of funny though, because I was doing traffic on the Score, the sports radio. And I was coming back from a Score Christmas party. I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to be in my own report. You know, it was just really, there's an accident. By the way, it was me. I'm a rollover. Can you get IDOT over here pronto? And it was a 1050. Stupid. But I just think you believed in heaven. You said you're Jewish, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. You practice your faith. You seem like a God-fearing woman. You believed in heaven, but to actually experience it, how would you convince somebody that, not your husband, your lovely husband, how would you convince somebody that really just doesn't believe and says, you know what, I'm a good person, I know there's no afterlife? How would you, if they said convince me?
You know, I've met some pretty strong atheists. I'm not here to convince that person or anybody that has their strong beliefs, because I will tell you from my own husband's perspective, he's watched me go through this, through this entire process. And I will tell you at the end, I'm not going to give away the end. Well, you know, I'm alive. So that's part of the ending. But the beautiful thing is that he's gone from hopeful agnostic to 100% a believer. And the doctors that practice medicine, and all the scientists that were naysayers and the ones that were like, there's no way possible, have changed the way they practice medicine. And when I speak at medical conferences to some of the most cynical, skeptical people, the biggest bunch of people, they walk away from my story and they say, they're scratching their heads like, I don't know how this is possible. You know, maybe 100 years from now, they'll be able to come up with an answer. I know the answer. You know the answer. But for them, they want to pull it apart and put the dots together.
Sure.
My husband looked at me. He's like, I don't even know who to ask anymore. And every time you look at somebody and you tell them, I was getting a manicure the other day, and I don't know this one. I was in Las Vegas, and I sit down and I'm like, oh my God, your best friend passed away. And she's like, you see Gabriella? And I said, and now why is it that I say best friend instead of aunt or sister or whatever?
Right.
Something happened, right? I was on low voltage as a kid. Then I went asystolic, which means I have no electricity running through my body. And now I'm on high voltage. So I can tell the people that are atheists will always find an excuse as to why it doesn't exist. The believers will always find an excuse and I say excuse, but you know what I mean? Will always find a reason as to why it does exist. And there will always be evidence pointing to both ways. It's just nothing is 100%.
No.
Science isn't 100%, and spirituality isn't 100%.
No.
So then you are caught in the and you take stories like mine and you take stories from other people and you say, you know what, you add them together and you say, okay, well, this didn't happen to me. This happened to a friend or somebody that I know. And there's more evidence that this happened. I'm just saying, look, I have no explanation for it. This is what I know happened for me. And it takes sometimes people to go through their own miracles in order to say, wow, okay, I didn't believe that before. And even though I heard Stephanie's story a million times, or one of my best friends was like in tears with the whole story, and she believed me, but she was like, okay, how much of that is real? Until it happened to her, until she actually felt her sister who had passed away. She actually felt her hand on her heart, you know, when she was in a moment of silence and she's like, that was weird. And I'm like, it's not weird. I'm like, why do how many times do I have to yell it on top of rooftops?
Right.
And she's like, it happened to me. So until it happens to somebody or somebody that they, that's all.
Well, I remember I was in Vegas once and I was sitting at a slot machine, just losing my pennies, because at that point I went from quarters to pennies just to make the drama last. I go with $20 to Vegas. Woohoo! And I was talking to this guy and he was very nice, very good looking. And somehow we got on the subject of, I don't know, I guess it was religion or something. But anyway, to make a long story short, he was just like, you seem so intelligent. I'm like, okay, where are we going with this? And why are you saying seeming? I'm going to punch your lights out, dude. So he says, no, by that I mean, you sit there and you say you're Catholic and you believe in God. And again, I'm like, where are you going with this? He said, you seem so smart. I just find people who believe in an afterlife and God almost like an easy way out, a cop out. And I was first of all, if you think you're getting lucky, now you're not. But secondly, that's not a way to win me over, buddy. But secondly, I was, that's his opinion. It's America. You can have it. I said,
absolutely.
And I feel certain people, not all, but certain people such as yourself who think it's a cop out. I think it's stronger to have faith and believe in something you cannot see than maybe it is necessarily to just say nothing exists. And he was kind of offended by that, like I really cared. I just thought it was a fascinating conversation I had with him. He said, I just feel like people who believe everything happens for a reason or this or that, it's kind of a cop-out. I was kind of stunned by that because I thought, why don't you go through your next difficult situation and just try to go on faith and not facts that things are going to be okay. And try that one out for size, because that's a lot harder. But,
I can't. Everybody has their opinions about this. I think anything extreme and any position in the extreme is really short-sighted because you're going to say, no, it doesn't exist. No, okay, fine. But I am sure in his lifetime or another lifetime, they can't explain one or two events and they just chalk it up to coincidence and then just compartmentalize it and not discuss it again. And that's just not who I am. And then, and going back to the conversation about, I don't believe in coincidences. Now I can look back at those things that I thought were coincidences and realize, no, it actually wasn't. It's no coincidence that I chose the career that I chose for 27 years. And all of a sudden, I write a book and then all of these things start coming together and people that I know and that have experienced near-death experience. I'm like, how is that even possible? And I've known you for 30 years and we haven't even spoken about this. So it's just bizarre, but a beautiful bizarre because I'm like, wow, this world is pretty magical.
It's fascinating, which is, why I'm doing this show. I've been in radio for 23 years and it's, I love it, but you get fired every year. And then you think, okay, now do I have to get a job? No, but I'm always asking questions. I'm always curious about things. Why? My poor husband, he kind of believes what he does and he doesn't really care. He just nods and smiles like a good husband. And I asked him the most bizarre questions. Why do you think, in 1700, what did women do when he's like, Jill, I don't know. Why do you ask these things? I said, because I want to know. Which is why I'm doing this crazy show. But the one question,
and he's like, can I just do your mic check and shut up?
Hey, he's making dinner right now, Stephanie. So as far as I'm concerned, he's a good man.
Yes.
Yeah. But the one question I wanted to ask you, and I don't mean to wrap up your incredible story because I want people to read your book and you can get into that. But you said your voltage went way up after this happened. So you went from a low frequency now. So are you really highly sensitive to everybody you meet or just certain people? Everybody?
I am, but what I've done now is I had to learn how to protect myself, and I didn't understand what that meant until I started to understand it, because I would go and speak engagements and all of a sudden I'd be wiped out when I'd get back to the hotel. And I'm like, what is going on? And I'd realize that I was taking on all of this and seeing spirits everywhere. And I was being affected by it, or I was seeing things just like the manicurist or, a friend of mine the other day. And I saw other things and I'm like, what is, I still have a hard time with it. There's a small speck of dust that's like, how is this even possible? But I think finally, after this whole process, I have finally decided, and my husband's actually the one that said it to me, surprisingly, which was a great way to conclude your show. My husband said to me, he's like, Stephanie, you experienced this, you've gone through this, you own it. This is yours and your truth. And it has become my truth because I'm winning all of it. So you can't deny it anymore. You denied it as a kid. You had a hard time with it through this, but you have to let go of the doubt. And I was like, this is coming from you? And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah. So once I decided to let go of the doubt, everything else, the floodgates have opened up.
You know, that's a really interesting thing to say because I had mentioned it on my last show, but I was locked out of my car, and when I was going in, it was before I was married, I was going in my apartment, and a very strong voice came to me and said, Jill, get a set of extra keys made and give them to your friend Kim. My friend Kim lives in my neighborhood. And I thought to myself, I probably should do that. Well, it was about a week later, I went to work, and I left the car running in the Orange Line parking lot, which is not a good neighborhood on the Southwest side. All day I'm at work giving traffic reports like I own the joint. My car was running with the keys in it for 8 hours.
Wow.
And I didn't have keys. I had to get a locksmith. My friend Kim came to make sure I was okay. And we waited like 2-3 hours. It was like $500 to get my car open. Not only did I leave the keys in it and the car was running like a ding dong, but that voice came to me about a week before so strongly, stronger than other times you experience intuition. And then I thought, you know what? I better start paying attention to these voices because when they're that strong, somebody's warning me about something. And I could have saved a lot of money and heartache by saying, hey, would you bring the keys so I can get my dumb ass out in the car and drive home?
Right. But you know better. I mean, you can actually explain to your audience what that sounds like and what that feels like and why that should be taken differently than just a casual thought in your head.
It was loud. You know,
yeah.
It was almost like if my brain had a voice and it was just in my head. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. That it wasn't a feeling; it was a voice. And my brain said, "Jill, get an extra set of keys made and give them to Kim." As clear as day. And I thought, oh, yeah, I should do that someday. And then after it happened, I filled up my car the night before. Something told me to fill up my car. I just thought, oh God, it's midnight. I worked up until midnight doing traffic, and I thought, I don't feel like filling up my car. There's so many weirdos out, but I did. Thank God, because I had gas in my car. So, well, tell people now what you do. Please promote yourself and how you bring awareness to this in your book and everything so they could buy your book and read it. It was a wonderful book. I read it in a couple of days. I told you it might take longer because of my kid. I have no time to take a shower, let alone read. But I had a couple of lucky days where I had time. So go ahead.
Thank you. So I am on the board now, the AFE Foundation, and we help raise money by the money goes to raising awareness for research, medical research, so that we can find a cure and at least give the hospitals an understanding and protocol in order to what they need to do when an AFE occurs. So you can get more information on afesupport.org if you're interested in donating or helping. That would be great, especially since 2 AFEs happen a week in this country and around the world.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, for a 1 in 40,000 risk, you hear about it much more. So it affects about 100 women a year in the United States alone. The leading cause of maternal death in the world. And then, so I speak at, hospitals. I was part of a legislative conference for the American Society of Anesthesiologists, and I talked to medical professionals, nurses, doctors, and to listen to the patients, because the patients are already telling you what's wrong with them. And for your audience, I tell people everywhere, if you sense something, say something, because it could save your life. If you're listening to that voice in your head and somebody else is telling you, oh, it's just craziness or whatever, take it from me that it's not craziness, and who cares if you sound crazy in that moment. Like I said before, if you sense it, say it, because it could save your life. And you can look up any of the information on stephaniearnold.com. And there's videos, there's book trailers. The book came out, it became a bestseller. It became the top 100 of nonfiction in the U.S. We're in 9 countries so far and growing. And the messages are getting out that we are not alone. There is another dimension at work. Intuition is extremely real. And if you want, you can find the book. It's called 37 Seconds anywhere where books are sold.
Yeah, and it was an easy read. By that I don't mean, oh, there were pictures. It was an easy read. Some books are so technical. You want to be able to read it as a story. So it was well written for everything that you went through, is what I'm trying to say, but it didn't come out that way.
Thank you.
It was captivating. Congratulations on the baby. Congratulations on being alive and being ballsy enough to say, hey, you better get this blood ready and this and that, because I can guarantee you 9 people out of 10 aren't going to do that. So it's really good for you to get that awareness out, especially you said really quickly you didn't really bond with your baby right away, and I can totally understand why, and that's so sad.
It is, but the relationship has changed.
Oh, sure.
I look at my son and I'm like, I can't even imagine a moment without him. So, the first few weeks with ports in my chest and not even knowing where I am, like it was very difficult. But now I can happily say that the family's intact. I feel blessed and grateful, and most importantly, that I made it through on the other side.
Well, it was really nice talking to you, and thank you for taking the time to tell your story. And hopefully,
thank you so much for having me.
Oh, sure. No, it's great. I mean, I love these stories. Oh, I don't love that you almost died, but I love the fact that you lived to tell about it. That's a wonderful thing. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, and I really want the skeptics to listen, because like you say, well, reality, what is that? Perception is reality, or your reality. That happened to you. It's real.
It did. Well, look, I can tell you that my book is absolutely, I bring on the skeptics because it is not even, I had the most skeptical crowd, most cynical crowd in the medical communities, and they are taking on the book. They're giving it to their doctor, giving it to their nurses, their nursing staff. So I will tell you that out of all the near-death experiences written in a book, there are many people that tell me that this is unlike the rest of them.
So, yeah, and you have to read it because A, I said so, and B, it is a good read. It really is. And I just think, like you said...
But I did gear it towards the scientists. Like, I really focused the book on what I could prove. I could tell you that I rode a unicorn through a rainbow in heaven, and I could tell you that, I saw God, and this is what he told me. But I can't prove it to you. What I did limited the book. And there are other things that happen, and which is where the second book is going. But I limited the first book to everything that I could prove. So your skeptics in your audience will enjoy that, and will enjoy, maybe not. But they will look at it and say, I don't have an answer for that. It's an interesting perspective on it, but it was provable, and which is something that a lot of these books can't do.
Well, yeah, because the bottom line is the one doctor that should have been maybe in front of you that you said wasn't there, but should have been, how would you have known that? How would you have known your child was playing in the hall? These are not coincidences that you pull out of your butt. You know what I mean? These are things that if they are, you're really good at it.
Yeah,
that's
no
what
kidding.
I tell people. If you just made this up, or if somebody, I've seen psychics for fun and mediums. I used to do that a lot for fun, and some of them were crazy. Some of them were really dead on, and I thought, wow, if you're just guessing on me, you're pretty darn good at it.
Right.
So it's just something for somebody to read, especially if you're not that much of a believer. Read it because you do back it up with facts. So Stephanie,
and also, by the way, for the men in the audience that are not listening to their wives or girlfriends when they're telling them something when they're pregnant, it's a good book for them, for the wives to say, see, I'm not crazy.
Bring a highlighter, take it to bed with you, and show him.
Right. It's so true.
It is true. But again, I could talk to you longer. Maybe I'll have you on again if you want. You said you're writing a second book?
I am. We're in the process of doing a bunch of things, but it'll be a while.
That is wonderful. Well, good luck with that. And thank you for being on my show.
And Dan, what are you making for dinner?
Dan, he made last night, pork chops, stuffed pork chops. It was very nice. I believe
I won't come over the porch just for kosher. So next time, let's make a dairy meal.
That's that's right. And you know what's funny? My husband's Jewish. I'm Catholic and he's Jewish, and he eats more pork than I do. Go figure.
So funny.
Oh, we have a mixed marriage. It's wonderful. But thank you, Stephanie, and thank you for listening to On a Quest. If you have any experiences like Stephanie, I hope not, but any near death, anything mystical, anything out there, I want to hear about it. Feel free. Contact me at Twitter, at On a Quest Pod, P-O-D for podcast. Podcast? Yeah, I speak for a living. On a Quest Pod, that's for podcast. And then follow me, Jill Urchek, and perhaps we will do a show on it. So thank you.